Wow, it's so amazing to be here. I just arrived a few hours ago, and I've been thinking about this for so long. The thoughts I'd like to share with you have to do with the inspiring future for educational change. Can we imagine a future in which all of our children are learning at high levels, in which creativity is blended with academic content knowledge, in which the necessary soft skills of compassion are blended with skills like courage, okay, and dissidence, and speaking out against injustice? So what is the kind of future that we imagine? What would be inspiring for you? As I thought about this question, I thought about my daughter Skye, who back home in Massachusetts is a Latin teacher. And she is training me on looking at the etymological roots of words. So I thought, inspirar, to inspire. And then I thought, spiritu. And then I thought, spirar as in respirar, to breathe again. And I thought that to inspire is to breathe spirit into. To breathe spirit into. What a beautiful image, to breathe spirit into. And who do we breathe the spirit into? Well, we breathe it into each other. My daughter tells me that according to legend, when a Roman was dying, if it was a mother or a father or a grandmother or a grandfather, that the Romans would hold a baby over the mouth of the dying person so that they could inhale the breath. Right? So it was a very literal thing to become inspired. So I am very much inspired by being here. The speakers that I have heard so far have been phenomenal. They have alerted us to the problems of substance abuse in our societies. They've alerted us to the need to preserve and uphold artisan cultures. Very important if we're going to have a diverse future instead of a standardized one. And they have alerted us to all the possibilities that lie before us for creative uses of technology, and I'm very grateful for that. What I want to try and do is to take our afternoon now and try and move it into the school as it now is. Okay, the school as it now is. The schools here in Porto Alegre or in other parts of Brazil, the schools back home in the US or in Australia or India or South Africa. How these schools now exist, where we hope that the children will get to the point of these children that you're seeing before you. They're engaged, they're inspired, they're excited. So if we can be thinking about that this afternoon, and thinking about it both at the micro level of the classroom and the macro level of the larger society, perhaps we can begin imagining a future which might be within our grasp of a humanistic education for all of our children. Well, ideally, our kids get there by themselves, but that's not realistic. They need teachers to get them there. Okay, now, there's a problem that I encounter in many countries around the world. If a college student or a university student tells her or his parents that they want to be a teacher, the parents start crying. They say, "You're going to starve to death. People are going to despise you. They're going to work you into the ground. They're going to abuse you. You won't have a private life." Right? This is a global problem that we have. And yet, when you're that child in that classroom, the teacher is the person who we hope is breathing spirit into you, who is igniting your enthusiasm, who is tapping into your passions, who's helping you to learn things about yourself that you never even imagined that you could do. Okay? So here's an interesting challenge for us. We want inspired students, but what is the chance that we can have inspired students if we don't have inspiring teachers? And then the question is, do we have inspiring teachers? And if we don't have inspiring teachers, why not? Okay? So we can think about that in two big ways. One might have to do with big socio-macroeconomic forces, unequal funding, for example, traditions of racism, ethnocentrism, so forth, that bedevil many countries. Okay? We can think on the macro level. But then as educators, we also have to think on the micro level of what do we do to ourselves. Okay? What sociologists call occupational socialization. How do we welcome new people into the profession? So I have to share some painful things with you. Okay? This is research that's now 36 years old from Dan Lordy. He wrote a book called School Teacher. And then he says teachers are caught in an unholy trinity. He doesn't use that term. I use that term because I teach in a Catholic and Jesuit university, and I think of everything in terms of the Trinity these days. I think it comes with the culture. So Dan Lordy said there's 3 problems in teachers' workplace cultures. The first one is what he called presentism, short-term thinking. Why do teachers get caught up in short-term thinking? Well, you try teaching 160 kids a day and see if you don't fall into a reactive mode. Right? They're coming at you and they're lovable and they're excited and they're angry and they're frustrated and they're punching each other and they're hitting each other, and there's a whole lot of energy there. So for a lot of teachers, what happens is they go into the profession full with idealism, and then pretty soon they're saying, I can't wait till the school year is over, or till the month is over, or till this week is done, or till the end of the day, or till lunch, right? Because there's so much coming at them. So there's presentism, short-term thinking. There's privatism. The way we've developed the craft, I can always go back into my own classroom and shut the door, right? I have this nice little private kingdom. And if anybody comes in to look at what I'm doing, then I can scream and yell at them about academic freedom, and they're frightened and they go away. Okay? So as a profession, we don't visit each other's classes very much and help each other very much, right? Which means the students experience tremendous unevenness in their instruction. And then the third part of the unholy trinity is conservatism. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Okay? Dan Lordy said these 3 things are mutually reinforcing problems. So being a teacher is very hard. You weep, you cry, you have bad days. La noche oscura de la alma. San Juan de la Cruz wasn't thinking about teaching when he wrote that. Okay, but teachers have dark nights of the soul. How am I going to get through to these kids? I'm losing them, right? We saw the presentation about substance abuse. What if I told you a week ago I was doing work up in Canada, I wake up in the morning, I'm getting ready to go to a high school, and I check the school's website, and I find out that 4 of the kids have been killed by a drunk driver the night before, and a 5th is in critical condition. La noche oscura de la alma. As educators, we have to grieve. There's compassion, which is suffering with. So being an educator is a hard job in many levels. However, it's not so bad if you just look the other way, pretend the problem will go away, put your head in the sand. If you're wearing a nice suit, you can feel good about yourself professionally, right? But we want to try and figure out a way to get past all of this. And that's when we have to go to a micro level of change in which educators, teachers, working with university folks from community-based organizations are always networking and sharing knowledge with one another. But it turns out that that's very hard to do. Why is it hard to do? Forgive me, I'm going to have to go back to history a little bit here. 13 years ago, Tony Blair of the UK and Gerhard Schröder of Germany, they wrote a pamphlet called The Third Way. Okay, in German, it was Die neue Mitte, the new middle. And the third way was supposed to take the best of government support for the social sector on the one hand, and markets and innovation on the other, and blend them together. Okay? So you would have stable bases of support, and you'd also have innovation going on. So a colleague and I, Andy Hargraves at Boston College, decided to explore that theme and see whatever happened to the third way, and what happened to it in education. So we went back a bit. You can kind of go back to the 1960s if you're in the North American context. I'm not sure what would work for your context, so I'll ask you to kind of think independently or afterwards about that. But if you were a classroom teacher in the 1960s in North America, it was fantastic. You could do whatever you wanted. Remember Robin Williams in the Dead Poets Society? He tells the kids to pull out the page of the book, and everybody says, yes, destroy the book, right? Or there's a great film out, it's called First Year, about there's an older teacher in San Francisco who's talking with a younger teacher, and the older teacher was clearly a hippie back in the 60s, and he was part of free schools, and he's telling the younger teacher all the great field trips and all the things they built and everything, and then the younger teacher says, yeah, but did the kids learn to read? And he said, we didn't worry about that. Okay? So in the first way, you had tons of freedom. Parents just trusted their kids, and they trusted the teachers, and left them alone to get on with the job. Teachers were isolated. You could have a real conservative teacher here, a real hippie teacher over here. Okay? You could have whatever you wanted because nobody was checking up on the instruction. Then we get up into the 1980s. Now, some people would say that the second way actually began, and many things that were piloted in the second way began over in Chile under Augusto Pinochet in the 1970s. And you know, he was good friends with Maggie Thatcher, who famously said, there's no such thing as society. Okay, so what he started doing is importing markets into the public sector. And then what people like Maggie Thatcher and Ronald Reagan were doing up in the US is they were supporting organizations that are saying, we've had enough of these hippies. Okay, the 60s are over. We're going to have clear standards. We're going to have tough curriculum. Everybody's going to teach to these curriculum. We're going to rigorously assess educators. There's not going to be any room for any creativity in there. We don't care so much about that. Soft skills like compassion, can't measure it. So we're going to measure reading, writing, and arithmetic. And we're going to do that over and over again. Okay, and if you wanted to do some community-based stuff or some arts-based stuff, maybe sometimes even some science-based stuff, you're out of luck. Come back in another 40 years when we're done with this phase. Okay? So that was the second way. In many ways, that's still going on very strong in many jurisdictions. And in this phase, educators are feeling beat up on. Okay? They're feeling criticized all the time. You know how the British are? They're so honest and so ironical. They called it flogging the system. That's what flogging is, beating somebody with a whip. And what was the system they were flogging? It was the teachers. It was the principals. It was the people working in schools every day. That didn't work so well because people got demoralized and they said, yeah, I don't think I want to do this. There's other things I can do. Bye. And they left. Okay? So then reformers began figuring out what we need to do is we need to have a new third way in education. So let's keep these really high standards, but let's also bring in market-based pressures, right? And in the third way is when we started really getting the rise of personal computers and handheld devices, mobile phones and all of that. So the idea of networking became very real. My colleague Andy and I studied a network called Raising Achievement, Transforming Learning in the United Kingdom. They got achievement gains at double the national average in 200 of 300 secondary schools in 2 years. Phenomenal gains. But how did they do it? To a certain extent, they had to game the system. They had to look at their data all rigorously. They had to figure out where they could get the quickest gains. And then you can do things, I don't know if these are popular here in Brazil, but around the world before kids take tests now, we're learning to give them banana and water, and if that doesn't work, we give them a candy bar and a Coke. Okay, and get them all woken up and ready for the test. And we have all these scandals that are going on all the time now, where whole districts are caught cheating to get those test score results up. Now, that's not very inspiring. Okay? So when I look back at a first way of all this professional freedom, a second way of all of these standards and markets, and a third way, ostensibly, of world-class standards, and I say, what happened to the kids? What happened to the teachers? You can go to whole professional conferences, and nobody's ever talking about children. So how can we start creating a space in our schools again where educators can talk about the kids who are in front of them every day? Because those kids have real pressing needs. The case about substance abuse. You know what's a terrible thing that's happening in some of our cities in the United States right now? The parents are buying Ritalin, which is a drug to calm you down, on the street corner and giving it to their kids to calm them down. And the kids show up at school and they're drugged and they're maybe 5 years old, 6 years old. Do teachers need a space to talk about those things? Do they need help to know how to talk to the parents? Of course they do. But that kind of problem isn't going to show up on any spreadsheet, on any data. They need colleagues to support them. And I am so proud of that Mindful Teacher seminar that Liz McDonald, a Boston public school teacher, and I created 6 years ago, Because one time a teacher had to come in and present a case like that. And all of her colleagues banded together to figure out what we could do to help that child. And in less than an hour, the teacher had so many concrete ideas that she could take back to her school. And she said one thing, she said, "Wow, that was amazing. It didn't even take an hour and you helped me so much." But she was wrong. It didn't take just an hour. It took 5 years to create a culture in which teachers could bring problems and share them with each other, because it takes vulnerability. Okay? So what do I want to do for an inspiring future for educational change? I'd love to go into schools and I'd love to go into communities where people are really focused on children. Okay? I'd love to go in places where people are pooling their knowledge about the children. Well, how is this child at home? And how do you see him on the playground? And what's he doing in school? Okay? And we're putting together all of the different pieces so that we can help so many of our children that we are losing right now. Okay? Those are tragic statistics that we got earlier about the kids who are negligent and abused. Their propensity, okay, to seek a respite through substance abuse is a tragic loss to all of us. We can't lose that potential. We can't build caring and learning societies if we let those children fall through the cracks. So what I am trying to do, and you are all part of this, is to build networks. And you build local networks like this, where we talk about what's actually going on in our school communities. We build networks at the state or at the provincial level. We bring outside knowledge in because sometimes we don't have enough knowledge. Okay? And that's no shame for any educator to say that. I work at Boston College, a university. We bring in outsiders to help us. So why can't we bring outsiders into our schools and then send our educators out? Now look, I know that all of this is expensive. Okay? I know that wherever I go, I'm always hearing these kinds of things are so expensive. And it's true. Good education is expensive, but then we have to remember what the alternative is in lost resources, in wasted lives. So the inspiring future, which I hope that you can invite me, can join me with for the future, is going to be an inspiring future in which we go to all those different educators, including the ones that we don't like, including the ones that gave up 15 years ago, the ones who are demoralized, and we start having these conversations. What would it take for you to be curious about your kids again, to be loving your curriculum, to want to go and work with parents around those issues? That, my proposal for you is we can do that. You heard I'm traveling all over trying to pitch this line. I hope that I've given you some things to think about that you find useful for your own context. And let's do this. Let's do what we can for the sake of the children. Thank you so much. Obrigado.